YouTube, what's up? I'm going to break down my recent poster design, which is a textured sci-fi design called Data Interference. So let's jump straight into Photoshop and I'll walk you through each of the steps. So guys, here's the final design that I've created and we're going to be working through this step by step. Now you can see this is very sci-fi themed. We've got a few futuristic intricate images here, as well as a lot of these modern shapes and type assets. Let me work through into a new document and we can begin. So I'm going to head up to File and New. Now for this, we're going to use 3840 by 4800 pixels, 300 resolution, standard for all of my poster design work, and hit create here. I'm going to set the background to black. On the original, we've got this data interference text box here, and we're going to work that in as the first step. So I'm going to create a new text box. I'm just going to add it into the center of the page and center justify. And we're going to be using the typeface Ivy Presto Display Thin. The way I usually generate this kind of text for posters like this is using ChatGPT to create kind of coded and abstract paragraph elements just that I can paste into user's copy. So I'm going to bring that in here. Now, this is when I can just begin the formatting. So I'm going to have data interference as the top line and remove this triangle from up here. We're then going to have @node on the line below. And now we can work on the actual formatting and sizing. So I wanted this all in caps, which I have formatted already here. Now I'm going to come over to my character panel and just bring down our leading so that the line spacing is a little bit smaller. From here, I'm just going to adjust the text box size and then simply just use the transform tools to make this a little bit easier. I'm also going to put data on its own individual line. Now on this slash recursion box, I'm going to highlight this line and change it to light italic. Now this is going to offer some contrast within the type. And then on this bottom line, highlight this, and we're going to use the golden ratio to just reduce it a little bit so that we can have even more contrast amongst the text. So I'm going to type in /1.618, which is going to divide my type size down. And this is amazing to use when you're formatting titles, subtitles, and body text. Then I'm just going to bring the leading up with this line highlighted, try and balance our line spacing, and then I'm going to bring this text box up. I'm actually going to reduce this a little bit more and then bring this one in a little bit more as well. There we go. That is looking good. Now throughout this design, you're going to notice a lot of emphasis on the grid layout. Now I haven't input some guides yet because we've not started structuring everything. But if you look at individual elements, you're going to see these kind of small modern shapes that kind of help to put the text within its own box. So coming back to our design here, I'm going to add in a new text box. Now I'm not going to drag this into a box. I'm just going to type it in and I'm going to add in our kind of angled brackets. So if you hold shift and comma, they're going to come up for you. Now, once again, I'm going to use the same typeface and I'm going to shrink this down to about half the height of our text. So let's say about 48 there is good for me. And I'm going to duplicate this and I'm going to drag this up. Now, I came across this pattern whilst I was designing and this was purely from accident, but I really liked how it came out. So kind of just play around with these assets and placement and you're going to notice a lot of things like this. Let me group these and just call it arrow. And now I can resize them both together to put them to the same height as this text here and kind of force them into the corners of the text box. Now here, we can create a duplicate using Command J or Control J, flip this round and place this on the other side. And I think combining this kind of like modern serif typeface with these kind of sci-fi assets and shapes just really works well for the theme of the design. So now we can add in just some small ellipses here. So let's come down to our shapes tool, select ellipse, and I'm going to create 2 white circles without any stroke on them. Duplicate, drag them across. And then once again, let me group these, corner circle. And now let me place this into the corner here and then create a duplicate, drag them to the other side. Once again, let me drag this content within the groups. It's going to be really important to group our work as we work through this for when it comes to formatting and adding in textures at the end. Now, let me just add in a few small ones just on this bottom of this N line here. Get rid of this properties panel. Once again, if you just highlight both, create a duplicate, drag them to the other side. And now I'm going to group all of these, drag them into our corner circle folder as well. There we go. Now this kind of like block of text is coming together really nicely. So let me actually start grouping this as one as well. So we're just going to call this data interference. Now on the original, you're going to see these large scale arrows here. Now I've created this similar kind of pattern, but just at a larger scale. So once again, same method as we used before. Add in these 3 kind of directional arrows and I'm going to rotate them 90 degrees. Now at this point, I wanted to change the typeface because I believe that this one does not have too much formatting for this icon. So I believe I used verbatim extended black here. And now what I've done is I've used my transform tools and just extended this really wide. From here, use your align tools at the top to get it center aligned with the rest of the type. Then once I've created that, duplicate, flip, drag it to the bottom, use the center align tools again. Now I'm going to highlight both of these and drag them so that they are horizontally aligned as well to make sure that they are equally spaced. There we go. That looks good to me. And I'm going to group these, name them large arrows, and I might actually drag them a little bit closer to the text itself. There we go. That's looking good. So now I just wanted to kind of structure this vertically as well. You know, we've got these large scale arrows, but I'm also going to add in a few thin lines on either side just to create it into sort of its own column so that it's easier to structure within the larger scale. So I'm just going to use our line tool just here, and I'm going to drag these down effectively to the bottom of the page. And I'm going to use a white stroke, set the stroke to 1, and then duplicate this and drag this over to the other side. You can see now that these are equally spaced from the arrow. Highlight them both, duplicate, and then drag them up and just apply them in the same way. That's looking good to me. So now group all of these lines, label that thin lines, and now I can highlight all of these assets, and we know that we've got a nice and organized kind of block column here. Now, my thought process behind this was now that we've got all of these modern icons and elements, I wanted to add in this kind of textured base. So I've found some images that I thought could work really well for this. So I'm going to drag them in. So I'm just going to paste that in here. Now you're going to notice this is already quite small, but it was this really cool kind of sci-fi pattern element. I thought this could work amazingly if I was to apply a threshold effect to it. So I've simply just scaled it down and placed it in alignment with the larger arrows here. Doesn't matter if it's going outside of the page here. Then I'm going to duplicate this, drag this up to the top. And just to give it a little bit of variation, I'm going to edit, transform, and I'm going to flip it vertically. Now, I'm going to group both of these, just name it pattern image, and drag this underneath the data interference text. And we're going to add a threshold layer down in our adjustments panel. Now, from this point, you can play around with the balance, but I thought just simply putting it into black and white was this really nice textured effect, almost a little bit of liquid distortion. So I think there is good for me. And I'm also going to apply a Gaussian blur on both of these just to make them a little bit more abstract. So let me put our pixels to about 3 and then repeat the same value on the other one. And I'm just going to step back into my threshold layer here just to adjust it to see if we've got the right balance. And I think about there is perfect for me. Now I can just clip our threshold layer to this folder just so it's not applying to anything below. Highlight everything. And then we know that we've got our column completely finished and sorted now. So let's place that there. Stepping back over to the original here, you're going to see what we've got left to add on the right-hand side. So now that this left column's done, we've got a few boxes of text, as well as a few more of these assets, and then some textured images and typography just here. So in order of composition of how I created it, we're going to do that again. So I'm going to work in the images first. So I'm going to drag in all 3 images that I've used here, and then we can format them individually. So these are all sourced from Unsplash, and I picked them because I felt like, you know, they can fit within the theme of sci-fi and kind of like data and coded elements. So, you know, you've got this kind of like futuristic spaceship kind of look, this neo pattern. And then I thought this kind of zombie image looks really cool because it's not your classic typical zombie. It's a bit more like wired and electronic. So in order of formatting these, I wanted to put them in a clear composition order. So now we're going to add in our grids just so we can work through this. So I'm going to come up to View, Guides, New Guide Layout. Now for margin, I'm going to add this up to about 250 just so they're quite far in. Columns and rows, I believe, I'm going to keep them where they are for the moment and then press OK here. So our first image, this kind of zombie image, we're going to place this on the top half. I'm going to kind of hover it along the bottom of this vertical line here. Within this column, we're going to keep it just here for the moment. Now this kind of figure element, I want close to the title. So I'm going to do the same kind of sizing, but just place it down here. And I'm going to make it slightly wider than this image for a bit of variation. I might move this one over to the left column for a similar reasoning. And then this modern pattern, I'm going to shift up here. And I'm actually going to replace the pattern with the kind of zombie image. I'm going to drag the zombie image on top. Now, as I take my grids down, I believe I should make this a little bit smaller, perhaps make this one a little bit smaller as well. I want to kind of format them in a way where I can connect the edges. So let me drag this one down a bit, maybe this one up slightly. And then if I highlight all 3, just drag them all slightly down, and then I'm going to group them here and say that that is good for placement for the moment. So now with these are varying colors and lights and details. So I'm going to implement a threshold layer onto each of these images. So for our bottom one just here, I'm going to add in a threshold layer, and then I'm going to use Command, Option, and G, or Control, Alt, G on Windows to clip this layer to the image. If you can't do the keyboard shortcut or I got it wrong, right click, and just here it's going to say Add Clipping Mask. The reason I'm not applying one layer to all 3 of these images is because they have varying lights and conditions, so I need different values for them. So now you can adjust your light balance. Now you can see as I drag it this way, it becomes a very clear square. Now I don't really want this. I kind of want it to have that detailed grainy top. So about here is perfect for me. So now let me just remove this. Now I'm going to duplicate this, drag this above our next image, add that same clipping mask. Now we can play with the balance again. That works for me. A little bit more, you know, high detail between the contrast of the black and the white. Duplicate again, drag it on, clipping mask, repeat those same kind of steps, get the right balance for this image. Now I'm going to say there is good for me, and I'm also going to drag the pattern image above that top image. There we go. Now the reason is because you see that there was this black element or the black edge of the image here that was overlaying, kind of cut off the top one. So there we go. Now our images are formatted. I'm just going to hide this folder. We can add in now the remaining assets to this. So let's work in the typography first. Once again, using ChatGPT to generate the same prompt. So this is just another selection from the same prompt I used. So I'm going to create a text box just here. I'm going to hold Option to just extend it on the point I've added it. Then I'm going to paste it in. Now I'm going to set this back to Ivy Presto display, set this at thin, and then increase the size, let's say to about 30 here. Now I want to format it in a similar vein to this text box here, the primary one. So let me drag our leading to 30. I might bring that slightly into 28, just so it looks similar. And I'm going to extend the margins of this text box so that there's only on 2 lines. And I'm actually going to decrease this slightly as I think it has higher contrast between the main title if I've made it a bit smaller. And now I'm going to highlight this bottom line similar to our other one and just make this light italic. Now that we've got this formatting done, we can duplicate this, drag this down, and we can paste in our second block of text. And I'm happy with the formatting placement of this already. So on this anomaly code, eluma, I'm going to make this our light italic line. And then I'm going to grab both of these text boxes and group them and name them bottom text. Now from here, we can move it around on a larger composition scale where we can look at where it's placed overall. I think this kind of placement is perfect for me. And then to work in our assets and shapes we've already created, which is a good tip to use when you're trying to fill out a composition. What I'm going to do is highlight our arrows folder that we've made on our data interference box, duplicate that and drag it out of the folder. And I'm just going to reformat this here. I'm going to rotate, drag this up, and then I'm going to make sure it's above everything so we can see it. And then just increase this in size. There we go. Now we've got an asset that we can clearly reuse. We can even slightly warp it just to give it a little bit of difference and contrast from the initial one. Increase that in size slightly, and I think that works perfectly just where it is. Now to add in our kind of final area of text, I'm going to duplicate this to save reformatting, and I'm going to drag it out of the folder. From this point, I'm going to use the golden ratio and divide this by 1.618 again, as we're going to be adding in some body text. So let me left align this and reset our leading to 15, which is around the same size as our text size here. And then from that same prompt, paste in our last area of text. Make sure this is left aligned. And then these kind of like unknown characters, I'm just going to manually remove these. And that is perfect for me. So now, once again, create a little bit of contrast in this, increase a weight on one of the lines. Obviously, if you're working with specific text, do it for the most valuable points that need to be seen first. Always consider what's going to be seen first when you're creating this. And then I'm going to decrease this in size once again using the golden ratio. Do the same thing on our leading. There we go. Now we've got some nice body text at the top as well here. And I'm just going to line that up with the top of this grid line. So now looking at this composition overall, we've got a few areas down at the bottom that I think could introduce a few more small elements, as well as this top corner is looking a little bit blank. But as I don't want to add in any more body text, we can fill this out kind of with shapes that can lead your eye through the composition. So I'm going to get our line tool and I'm going to drag a line in horizontally from the right hand side. I'm going to make this the 1 point stroke as well, the 1 pixel stroke, and then duplicate this and turn it into a cross-like aesthetic. Now I feel when you get these kind of perpendicular lines, for me, it really fulfills the kind of sci-fi brief, especially if it's aligned with a grid. So let me align that with our grid lines just here. And then we can also use these shape assets to kind of really fulfill the sci-fi brief. So if I add in these kind of endpoints, so if I add in some rectangles here, I'm going to make sure the stroke on these is turned off as I don't want any rounded edges. And now with these rectangles, I can connect them to the end of the line. I can then duplicate them, turn it into a few of them. I can even add a stroke, let's say on the inside. I'm going to select this line here on stroke options and I'm going to do a line to inside. Then I'm going to remove the fill and increase that stroke to 3. So then we've got these contrasting elements here. Now, with those kind of endpoints of the lines, I think it, makes it look a bit more like a heads-up display, in my opinion. I'm actually going to swap those two round, drag that there. There we go. And now we can just duplicate a few of these assets, rotate these, drag them to the end of these lines here. Now with the variation, that 100% helps as well. I can even add in another rectangle that's slightly longer. I'm going to fill this one in, remove the stroke. There we go. Now, I think that it's quite good to add in a thicker area here, that this filled block area of white. Now, this as well, if you look at it from a contrast perspective, if you're looking at this piece and you're looking in the top area, contrast and scale is what you're going to see first. So I'm looking at this bold white area and the directional lines. So the lines kind of gauge you to this point, and then that's when you're going to read this kind of type asset. Same kind of way if you read the text first, you read that, see the line, follow it down, now you're at the image. And then it kind of guides you through it in the correct kind of way that you want to do it. So that's how you should structure your assets and type that you want people to read. Now, I've made this differently from the original, but I'm quite happy with the updated version. And I'm also going to add in my logo here as I've done similarly on the original. So drag that in as an asset. Now I'm going to place this just in between these images here, in between the darker images for a little bit of contrast. Maybe drag it on the lower hand side or even up in this corner aligned with the top lines. Nice. Now I can just fill in a few more shapes. So for example, here I've got this ellipse tool. Now from this kind of like bottom contrast area, I'm going to create a few small circles, fill them out, remove the stroke, drag them over to this right hand side and align these with the grid lines here. Create a duplicate, place them together. You can place them however you like. Now this is kind of just to really emphasize the placement of the grid and kind of get these elements aligned. I'm only going to duplicate one and drag that over to this side here. Maybe even make it a outlined one and make that one an outlined one as well. The reason is I don't want them too prominent. I don't want them taking any attention away from the actual assets and what you're trying to read. I'm also going to shift this text and make sure that that is aligned with our grid line here. Then I'm going to take these two circles, duplicate, drag them up to the top right corner, place them just there. With our line pattern here, highlight all of that, drag that down to just a line as well. There we go. Now everything's fit within the grid. Just add in the small last bit of text here. So I'm going to grab one of these arrow folders from the data interference, and I'm going to grab the actual text box, duplicate these, drag these right to the top. So then I can drag this over and I'm going to type in the word signal. This was the initial idea for the poster, was use the word signal as the primary text. And I realized that after a while, I quite liked just the small text option that I came up with, but I felt like I could have added a kind of a bit more of a prominent scale. So that's how I created this. So now I believe I typed in communication. Almost turned out to be this kind of like mini logo design. Quite happy with it. So adding in this as kind of like a logo icon and then this small text down here. So then from this point, I grabbed our signal, communication and arrow box. Just named this signal. Made sure that any text boxes are sized where they should be, not oversized. Drag that across there and just shrink that all in. There we go. So now this is grouped. Highlight this, rotate, and I wanted to place it just here with the images as well. Amazing. More text asset to add that I've just overlooked. So this asset is a kind of large scale type outline. So I'm just going to grab one of our text boxes and increase it in size. Let me make sure that I shift this to the top outside of its folder so that we can format it afterwards. I'm going to type in the word frequency. Now I'm just going to shrink this text box in and make sure that this is left aligned. And now around this point, I'm just going to split it onto 3 lines and then just add in the space bar to create some distinction between the starts of the lines. So from this point, I'm just going to drag in my leading and try and overlay them. Now from here, this is going to look very random and odd. And I came across this as a pure accident, thought fit in really well in this kind of area that I mentioned earlier that might need a little bit more in it. So from this point, I've added just an inside stroke. So come on stroke, set the position to inside, 3 pixels, press OK, and then drag the fill down to nothing. And I thought this was an intricate asset and I thought it looked really cool just to include here. So I've just made it small enough, it doesn't need to be readable. That wasn't really the point of it. I just thought that it fitted in really well in this composition. Just another abstract asset to add to this kind of sci-fi poster. There we go. Now I've ordered this in. Let's just move on to our texturing. Now to create this heavy texture effect that I've added on the original, we're going to be using primarily the filter gallery. So to do that, we're going to bounce between 2 different primary effects and then use masks to hide and reveal them. So the first step I need to do is create a new layer combining every visible layer. So I'm going to do Command, Option, Shift, and E. Now on Windows, I believe that will be Control, Alt, Shift, and E. And I'm going to name this Filter 1 and convert this into a smart object. Then come out to Filter and Filter Gallery. And we want to add 3 effects here. First one is notepaper, as you can see here. Now the settings of this will not matter too much. This is just to give us some distressed look around the edges and a little bit of depth. Then you want to add torn edges, and then you want to add chrome. And now you need to order them in this order here. So chrome at the bottom, then notepaper, then torn edges. So I'm going to hide chrome for the moment and then set our preview to fit in view. From here, it's all white, which means the image balance is off. So we can play around with this image balance slider until it reveals our design. So now you're going to notice as I zoom in, the edges of all the assets now are going to have this nice distressed look. Look at that. Looks great. Kind of destroys and kind of wears down all of the edges of the text. So now play around with these settings here. The lower the smoothness, the kind of more harsh it's going to be, but also it's going to go slightly blurry. So try and keep it up and get a good balance, as well as this contrast, but you don't really want this grain effect yet because that's not what we're going to be using to create that grain. So we want that grain on the background hidden. So this is good for me. So here I'm going to hit OK. Now I'm going to create a duplicate of this with the filters applied, and I'm going to name this filter 2 and then put chrome in the title just for reference. And now I'm going to double click back on this filter gallery and I'm going to reveal this chrome layer. As I zoom out, you can see really cool harsh effect. It creates these kind of contrasted outlines as well as like this 3D look. So now we can go into our chrome section and just adjust the detail and the smoothness. So I'm going to drag the smoothness down. That's going to reveal a bit more of the information, increase the detail a bit, maybe go slightly higher, maybe put the smoothness on 0, and there we go. Now the reason we don't just do one layer is because this is a lot to look at. So I just want to create some areas that look like this and some areas that look like the original. So that's why we're going to use 2 layers. So here, just press OK. And now with our chrome layer selected, we're going to add a mask. We're then going to highlight this black and just hide all of it. Now we can just use our marquee tools to reveal areas that we want to have that effect on it. So for example, this bottom text area, I'm going to highlight, leave enough space around the edges for the effect, select my white color, reveal that there. And I'll just do this on assets around the design. And it's just going to add some really nice contrast between the really harsh textured elements and just the slightly distressed elements. So these arrows here, add in that effect. I may do it for these as well. And then one of these threshold effects I can add it in on, as well as these sidelines. So let me just highlight all of this area. And there we go. You know, it comes across really well. I now want to add it on these two top images here. And then I'm going to use a brush to just hide the areas here that is overlapping with our layer beneath. So let me just brush that out. There we go. Now we've got this kind of weird area here. So because the base of this image is black and it's overlapped here, we've got this kind of weird shape coming into the image. So I'm going to create a new layer on top of all of it. And I'm going to get my black brush on hard, and I'm going to drag in a black brush kind of the entire way across the top. Now on top of that, I'm going to add in another layer. I'm going to set the other one to dissolve on layer mode. Now on the new layer, I'm going to get a white brush and I'm going to paint in slowly into this gap. Now, this doesn't have to be perfect because the image already was quite distorted and grainy. So I'm going to set that layer mode to dissolve as well. And now on this top one, I'm going to get the eraser and just go over it. Now I can do the same kind of thing on our bottom layer, just to kind of create these connection areas and make it a bit more inconsistent just here. And then just balance this how you like, get the eraser, kind of go over it, or get your black brush out and paint over it again. So now as I zoom out, still got this nice dissolve look, and it looks a little bit more even and balanced now. Now, if you wanted to get it perfect, you'd have to go back into the initial image folder, and then on this layer, you want to add in a mask on that image. Just add in a black mask just to make sure that it's not overlapping, and then just re-add the filters. But for the sake of the video, I'm just going to give you that quick fix. And I'm just going to group these, name this image adjust, make sure our layers are still revealed here. Now with our primary filters added, we're going to add in one more layer. So I'm going to repeat the same step using Command Option Shift and E, or Control Alt Shift and E on Windows. Name this primary and convert this into a smart object. Now from here, we're going to go on filter, filter gallery, and we're going to add in just the notepaper overlay. So now with all of our effects added, you can see, you know, we've got the effects of the chrome here, and we've got the contrast of the detailed effect and the kind of slightly distressed effects on the text. Put the graininess to a point where you can just about see it, so it's a fine detail than kind of like too protruding, and then hit OK here. Now from here, we need to add in some adjustment layers to get this back to our black and white color. So the first one I'm going to do is down here. I'm going to add in a brightness and contrast. Command Option and G to clip it, or right click and click on clipping mask. Then I'm going to reduce this brightness right down. Now play around with these sliders as I increase the contrast as well. It's going to make these lights lighter and darks darker. From this point, I'm quite okay with the balance. It's probably as good as we're going to get it from this layer. Now we can add in a gradient map. Once again, clip it. And now immediately here we've got our black and white preset already made. So I'm going to drag in the black to give us some more contrast, and drag in the white to, again, give us more contrast between the colors. It's going to give us a higher contrast. And now when I zoom in, you've got this really nice notepaper, depthy and embossed look across all of our layers and the background. So it kind of adds in this uniform texture the entire way across every asset. So now from this point, I can zoom out and our poster is looking pretty much finished. We can now just add in a small texture overlay if you want to, or you can keep it the original of how I've done it here. So I'm going to paste in a texture from Design Syndrome, which is a kind of paper cut texture. Now it's got this really fine detail and a bit more of a light contrast. You can see this kind of like light beam going across the bottom. So what I'm going to do is add two of them in here. So I'm going to center align it, drag this down. So I'm going to use our align to bottom tool up here, and then just shrink it down till it's about, literally just about the width of the page. So now once again, align to bottom, then I'm going to duplicate this, flip it upside down and drag this up. Now this is going to not going to matter if this is perfectly aligned, because of the nature of it being PNG, you're not going to be able to see the line that crosses. So drag that down a bit. That looks pretty good to me. I might increase this one in size just so there's a bit more variation between the two. Now I'm going to group both of these and play around with our layers. Now from this point, because they're PNGs, I'm going to set the opacity to 30, set the opacity to 30 on both. Now as I zoom in, we've got this nice scratch effect going across, as well as these kind of creases and light areas at the bottom. Now if you wanted to add some further customization to this, you can go onto your texture layer, Command L to open your levels tab, and then play around with the contrast between the shadows, midtones and highlights. It's going to help you to balance the texture, hide and reveal details that you want to add. But for this case, I don't think I need to do that. And that is our final design complete. Now you lot, as always, thank you for making it until the end of the video. I hope you find it useful and that you can learn something to add to your own design process. Now, if you want to see some more content and learn a little more, I've got another video just here that YouTube thinks you need to see. So go and watch that, and I'll see you over there.